then of course I see life very differently. And you see these governments and you see these wars and you see the corruption, and I'm just looking at it literally thinking like, you guys are so foolish, and you're leading us into a terrible direction. But I don't really fight it. I mean, because what can I do, right? The best thing I can do is just change me. I think you probably made this point, because when you change yourself, you have an impact on the world somehow. Even if it's not like a physical impact, like, hey, I'm the richest guy in the world and I created a machine that makes free energy for everybody or whatever, nothing on the surface, but something that happens deep within that is affecting everybody in a deeper way that they're not even aware of consciously. Mm-hmm. And so that's the whole reason that I've always taken the path that I've been taking.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about hierarchies at some point, because you also have some downloaded knowledge about spiritual and societal hierarchies.
Yeah, I mean, I could touch on it briefly and see if people are interested in stuff, because these are things obviously that I wouldn't ordinarily share, and you wanted me to share. Most of the stuff I keep very silent. So I'm pushing my own boundaries here. But as far as hierarchy, you can ask someone if they believe in God, and I don't mean like a Christian God, a Buddhist God. Let's just say a higher power or the creator of some sort. But do you think that this creator created a hierarchy, amongst creation itself or humans itself? And a lot of people would be like, oh no, God wouldn't make somebody better than someone else. And the thing is that's the way humans think. They just automatically think that if you're higher on the hierarchy, that you're better than someone. That's the way that humans tend to think, right? The president is much more valuable or better person than a guy flipping burgers at McDonald's, or whatever. But as far as I experienced and as far as I was shown, there is a hierarchy. And you can see very clearly, again, if you look at ancient scripture where it talks about his highest angel, right? Well, right there, he's letting you know there's a higher angel. And not only that, but there's things written about on planet Earth, how the human being is going to be in charge of all of creation. Like we're the one overseeing it. So we're above the other animals. Mm-hmm. But being above it's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's the opposite, in my opinion. The higher you are, the greater responsibility you have. Mm-hmm. When you have more power, that power should be used in everything that is good, everything that is of love, because you have this power. Where I think right now, the people who have the power, it's the opposite. They have so much greed and so much corruption. They're not doing things for us. They're doing things for themselves and their own self-interests, because they don't have enough, in my opinion, love for others and love for humanity. Because, it reminds me of another verse where Jesus said something very interesting. He said, I didn't come here to be served. He said, I came here but to serve. And that's the way that it should be for the people who are higher, in regards to this hierarchy. But there is definitely a hierarchy, and I did see it, and I also felt it. And you can actually change your place within the hierarchy. And guess what changes it? This was very clearly shown to me when I was on the other side. And there is no lying about it. There is no hiding it. But the thing that changes your hierarchy is literally how much you love, how much you truly care. And you embody the vibration, you embody how much you love. And the more that you truly care and love, you begin to rise up. And one thing that I discovered about life in general, because if we ever wonder, like, what's the purpose of life? Why are we here? All this stuff. By being in this physical body, it actually gives you an opportunity, a greater opportunity for growth. Because if you're a spirit and you don't need anything, you don't need food, you don't need money, you don't need shelter, you don't have any needs. By being put in a position where you're so needy, so vulnerable, you age, you get sick, you eventually die, you go through all these things that are challenging to you on a state of love, to challenge you in these states of fear, all these things. You can either just try to get through life, or you can utilize these for self-growth that can help your spirit grow and rise up higher. And eventually you can rise up higher in the other realms and where you belong within the structure of this quote unquote hierarchy.
Actually, you're funny that you said that the more you help and love and serve somebody else, the better you grow. This is a concept called Muscapius in the Native American culture, and Joe Fox Dreamer talks about it. That when he was first trained to be a shaman, he was entitled to be a Muscapius, so to serve everybody around, not just to bring them coffee, of course, but to serve their needs, to help them.
Yeah, definitely different. As far as service, it's not a service, obviously, of making their bed and making them coffee. That's not the kind of service we speak of, right? Public service, that's what it is. Public service.
Okay,
You know, that's what they're supposed to be. But obviously, I think we've strayed a long way from that. And, you know, I wish that we would use simple things. To be honest, I wish we would drug test every single politician. I think all of them should be required to go through certain processes of even some of these substances that bring out the truth of what's within you. Like, for example, let's say they were having a debate. Okay, everybody needs 6 shots of tequila and a couple glasses of water before the debate so that the truth comes out, right? They can actually say what they really believe.
That's actually, it's funny because it's actually a joke. And my dad always used to say, I don't trust a person who doesn't drink. Because apparently they're hiding something. I mean, it's not the entire truth, but there is truth in that. If you're not allowing yourself to show what's in your subconscious mind, what you're hiding, then you're hiding something.
I completely agree with you. And I wish that we could put lie detectors on politicians when they're up on stage, you know, debating each other. I want to see where they're at with their heart rate and see if they feel that they're saying the truth. Obviously, again, a substance that would bring out more truth. I think that would be a wonderful thing. I mean, geez, we drug test people to work in fast food, and yet we don't drug test any of these politicians who have their finger on, I don't know, a nuclear button or something crazy. And we just let them, you know, do whatever. It's totally crazy to me. But yeah,
I was drug test for my first job after my bachelor's degree as a financial analyst. Can you imagine?
Of course, I know, it's great. I've been drug tested so many times for stupid jobs, just stupid jobs that have no power in the world. And the people in the most power, of course, they don't get drug tested or anything else, you know. So it's really dumb to me. But again, all these things in the future, I believe, will change. We're going through a process of change right now. We're going through some growing pains, and you know, and we just have to kind of see where things lead.
Okay, so where are you now in terms of understand? That's a difficult question. I don't expect you to answer. If you feel like, if it comes to you as an inspiration to answer. If not, you know, just forget it. But since you have experienced a lot of things ahead of the larger population, where are you at the moment right now in your understanding of the world, spirituality?
When it comes to the changes that I've been through and what I see mine in possibly in humanity in the future, one is I know that I've always cared about people, but I'm carrying my level of love, I think, is growing a lot more. I do care a great deal about people. I know that I have much more, I hate to use wisdom because I know that I'm not wise, but I have much more wisdom than I once did. So for example, I value my time a lot more because I know that our lives are very short. And so if our lives are very short, we only have so much time to be able to do what we need to do in our lives, you know, whatever path we decide to choose. And the way that I treat this body is very different now. Before I used to literally abuse it, right? I would take any substance. I didn't care about it. I was literally trying to kill it, which is not good. Now I do the opposite. Now I care a great deal for it. And I realize that there's a connection with the spirit that is better when the body is more pure. And so this is why I try to drink, you know, extremely clean water, did all the water research and the hydrogen and the foods and everything that I do is all for that. That's literally the whole purpose, is for me to be not only in good health, learn what works for others, but also for me to have my connection so that I can continue to gain more knowledge and wisdom from the other side and from spirit. And so all these that I practice. And hopefully humanity, I know that once humanity begins to realize these things, you know, corruption can't really be alive if you don't have these selfish desires, you know, and if you care so much about other people, you're not going to want to cheat the people that you care about. It just won't work. You won't do it. And so hopefully this will, you know, continue to come out, and just being very considerate to each other, you know, in multiple different ways. And like I said, in cleanliness, you know, the Japanese do it a lot too, though, on a lot of, like, when they grow food, like in Japan, they don't really talk about organic food. You know, here in America, we have organic food, non-organic food. In Japan, the reason they don't talk about it is because they always try to grow food without pesticides. And if they have to use pesticides, they try to use the least amount possible to make the food cleaner. And that's just, they just do it because it's the right thing to do. You know, it's like just part of their culture. And I think for other countries, it's just going to take time for this growth to ultimately happen. And I think there's a lot of confusion right now in America, confusion on literally so many fronts. I mean, I just saw a thing. This made me very sad, and it's probably a taboo subject. Nobody wants to really talk about it, but in America, they're talking about it. You know, they're talking about a lot of this, the whole transgender community, you know, the LGBTQ, all this stuff. And, you know, obviously I have judgment on it. Like, I just think people should be free. And if they want to be whatever they want to be, that's fine. What I don't agree with is, one, like when somebody is young, and obviously I've been through this myself, I'm sure you have too, you can have a certain opinion when you're young that can change later in life, right? And the problem is that if you do something to yourself physically, much like I did, I mean, was trying to kill this body, I highly regret what I did. Now, I can't imagine if I were to have some crazy surgery that then I would regret, you know, like removing your breasts or removing your genitalia, or just, and then putting hormones in your body to try to manipulate your hormonal levels in the body that could potentially cause damage, you know, long-term ramifications. These things are, you know, to have a child doing these things, you know, it, to me, is crazy. But what the Japanese have been noticing, and I find this actually, you know, very, very interesting, is how we talk about all these kids who are maybe confused about their gender or trying to figure it out or whatever. They're going through this whole process, but yet we don't talk about how we, like adults, are treating children in regards to, like, for example, just the way we feed kids. So we send them to these schools, and I mean, I've been through the system, you know, they just put some pizza on there, and they give you just some chocolate milk or a soda pop, and they're just giving you garbage, right? We're not even talking about this. We're so focused on the way they identify themselves, and yet we're not feeding them properly. And although this may not seem important to anyone, there's clear scientific evidence on how food affects our bodies and how that affects our state of mind. And one of the things that they discovered in Japan, and I want to do more research on this, is how these foods, different foods, affect us, affect our mental state, and we can be confused about our gender identity because of the way that it affects us hormonally, you know. And then you have people talking about it a lot. And look, when I was younger, I was very connected with my feminine side. You know, I'm not gay, but I'm connected with my feminine side. I can connect with parts of myself that are feminine. And then I also have my masculine side. I'm not a huge macho guy, you know, like I don't want to get in fist fights and, you know, compete how much beer I can drink or anything silly like that, you know. But I have kind of a little bit of both these sides, and I think both sides are healthy, you know. But if I had somebody constantly telling me, hey, you know what, you seem a little female, or a little, you know, female in certain aspects, you know, maybe you're gay. And if they kept pushing this on me, if this would have happened to me while I was going through everything that I went through when I was young, and then if I had maybe a terrible diet, or, for example, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in water, back to these third-party, you know, lab tests, we have a lot of things in our water that affect our estrogen levels. So I don't know if you know that there's literally scientific evidence showing that there's certain parts of male genitalia that are becoming less like
shrinking. Talking about estrogen, I remember that the consumption of soya, maybe that's why the Japanese had made this study, because they consume a lot of soya. And I know you talk about natto, which is the fermented soya beans, but they consume it in any state. So soya itself, I don't know whether it contains the same level of estrogen when it's already fermented, but when it's not fermented, it actually contains a lot of estrogen.
Yes, that's true. But there's new data on that also, by the way. So a lot of people are hyper focused on that, but what we didn't realize is that we actually have different estrogen receptors.
Ah,
This is new scientific fact information.
okay.
And it's important because what it shows us is that if you use something estrogen, like a hormone or chemical to try to influence your levels of estrogen, and the kind that you get from a food, the receptors are different in the body and how
Okay.
they affect the
Aha.
body. Because I don't know if
Interesting.
you're aware of this, because we literally have information that estrogen can affect cancer in a negative way. But yet we have data that shows that the estrogen receptors in regards to the way that they work with food, specifically soy, because there was a study done on soy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what they found is that it actually helped cancer.
Okay.
And so this is very confusing because one estrogen makes it worse, one estrogen makes it better.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
it's because we have different receptors, and food is different than just a hormone that we might
Yeah.
supplement, you know.
Right.
And so all these things we're allowing to learn more about our bodies through these studies that that have been done. And it's actually part of the protocol. The gentleman with the shrinking tumors, we're actually using natto, which is a
Yeah.
form of fermented soy,
Mm-hmm.
and even a little bit of soy milk, because of scientific studies that I found. And so that's been part of the protocol, and it's obviously it's working. And so, and then of course they have, the cancer rates in Japan being much lower, and things of this nature. And they literally take people from Japan and bring them to the US, and their cancer rates go up, especially like breast cancer with women. And so all these different factors, really play a role. But I think what's playing a role, going back to these kids with their, it's a very taboo subject, and something that I usually stay away from taboo subjects. And I don't want to talk about it, but I'll think about it because I'm thinking, okay, what's the right answer? What's the way to go here? And the right answer, I think, is the very thing that nobody's talking about, because the solution that they're trying to provide is, okay, let's talk more about sexuality in schools and tell kids more about it. Their answer is, let's take taxpayer money so that these kids can do surgeries on themselves. It's just crazy to me. And they're almost feeding into these ideas, but yet we're not talking at all about, hey, what kind of water are we giving our kids? What kind of food are we giving our kids? Are we giving them everything the body needs so the body can be healthy, balanced? So, and if they still feel that way, that's fine. That's not really the point here. The point is that I think that we feed our kids trash. And when you look at a country like Japan, the way that they feed kids in schools is insane. They literally have
This is what
nutritionists.
Yeah, this is what
You
I
know,
wanted to tell you. In Bulgaria, because at some point most countries were infiltrated, including their kindergartens, their whole educational systems. In Bulgaria and in the ex-communist bloc,
Mhm.
kids below the age of 3 were not given meat and sugar, none, zero, in kindergartens. Now it's allowed.
I think all this information is very interesting. I know the human body changes as it ages. So I have a theory about how we're supposed to feed ourselves differently depending on our age, and
Yeah.
also what we're going through, biologically. And again, nobody's talking about this aspect. Nobody's talking
Yeah.
about how we're actually really truly educating or feeding these kids. I feel terrible for these kids because there is so much weird stuff in our environment these days. And then we go and support it with the psychological
Right.
aspect that, what? Yeah, if you feel this way, that's right. And it's like, oh, okay. And as a kid, you're so influential, you can be influenced so much. And I just feel terrible, for these poor kids and everything, that they might be having to go through.
So why do you think Japan was not infiltrated? Why are they still keeping to their original nutrition system?
One thing I've observed about the Japanese is that, well, they're clearly intelligent, but they think a lot about certain things. And this is why I love their research and the data that they do, is because to me, it just makes all the sense in the world. Doing research on food and how it affects the body. I mean, that's awesome because, they found, for example, natto is very anti-cancerous and whatever, but they do numerous studies thinking outside the box. They're the ones who uncovered, well, not only hydrogen, which we know is just clearly amazing. It saved my life, but they also have been discovering things about gut and the gut flora and the way our GI works. That's going to change the world of medicine. They were discovering, they had this one study that was so weird. They literally discovered that if we ate vegetables first thing in the morning, that it would help regulate blood glucose all day long. And they couldn't figure out why, like why in the world would that do it? And so then what they ended up uncovering was a part of our anatomy, a part of our GI that we didn't even know existed. And the only reason we figured it out was because of the impact on this study. And they just do all these studies, and they understand the correlation between food and health, both mental health and physical health. And they invest so much into things that are important. In America, I feel like they don't. They invest in the things that aren't important.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking. The reason why I use the word infiltrated is that a lot of the scientific societies are infiltrated, and they're paid for to come up with a specific research. So why is this not the case in Japan?
I don't know. I mean, they certainly have they've definitely been infiltrated. I can see it clearly. I can see one thing on the news in America, and literally the exact same thing is in the news in Japan, as if it was literally just translated and put on their news. And I'm talking about news where they're trying to bash certain people, which will remain nameless right now, or they try to push a narrative, and they push the exact same narrative in the mainstream Japanese news media. And so I did notice that, and I know that hydrogen, as much as I love hydrogen, Japan their government tried to shut it down. So it wasn't something that they were just like, yeah, you discovered how amazing this is for everybody's health. They tried to shut it down in Japan.
The question is, how do they still remain to preserve this purity of intention without being sabotaged?
Well, I guess one of my personal theories would be, a lot of people don't know this about Japan, but they have an interesting history where they used to not always be super good, great people. You know, they had their violence and they had their internal wars and all these things. There's two things that I found very interesting about the Japanese. One, I'm sure you're aware of how like the Catholics used to go around the world, and they used to try to manipulate the people of a nation and say, hey, you know, Jesus is the way, the Catholic thing is the only way. And they would try to infiltrate and push their views on the people. And they were very I think the ones in Japan, the ones that went over there, I believe were from, it was either Peru or Portugal, something with a P, I thought. But whatever it was, one of these countries, the Portuguese, I think is what
Portuguese,
it was.
the Portuguese were in the area,
Yeah, and so they go to Japan, and they're trying to tell them about, hey, you know, Catholic way is the way to go. And the Japanese, and they went there basically saying, hey, we know God, and you need to listen to us because we're here to teach you about God. And the Japanese were like, we already know what God is, and what you bring in here is nonsense, and we don't want no part of your evil, you know, demonic ideas or confusion ideas. Like, we don't want no part of it. And they were so pushy. And if I remember correctly, they literally they either killed the guy or cut off his head or whatever it was, send it back to their ship. And they said, don't come back with your ideas, with your evil ideas. We don't want these type of things in our nation. And I think they came back again, and the same thing happened. And eventually they just let it go. They're like, okay, don't mess with these Japanese. We'll go to other nations, just leave these guys alone. Because the Japanese originally were something called Shinto, was their belief system. And this belief system is that basically God is in all things. And so God is in the trees, the flowers, you know, the air, just all of nature, you know, it is alive, and everything has a spirit, and all these things come from God. And you know, and they were really big on things like that. And they really wanted to respect.
That was the belief everywhere around the world. The original belief of people, just call it different names, but people believed in the same thing.
Yeah, I think this is why they were so grounded in their beliefs, and they really understood already. That's why they're like, you're coming here to preach to us about God, but we already know. Like, you're just confusing us with your ideas. We don't want you to bring that to our people. So ultimately, this guy named Kukai, who is incredibly, a lot of wisdom. You know, wisdom is huge for guiding people or a nation. And I've been observing this throughout time, is that these countries would have leaders. These days, our leaders are just, they don't have any wisdom. They're just corrupt individuals. But this guy, and not just this guy, many monks throughout history influenced Japan. And the reason I ultimately discovered this was because I would observe things that the Japanese would do that I thought, wow, there's so much wisdom in that. Where did this come from? Like, why are they so into this? And I started tracking it, and all these ideas were coming from monks, people who literally would sit in deep levels of peace, meditate, contemplate, all these things about trying to find a better way, of doing things, both for your health, because that's what's so amazing about the Japanese. They do so many things for their health. I mean, even something as simple as soy sauce. Okay, we don't think much of soy sauce. It's like a salt, and we put it on things for flavor. But soy sauce is actually fermented. I don't know if you're aware of that. But
No,
when
I
they
didn't know.
make it the original Japanese way, it's fermented, which is really
Mhm.
good for you, right? Then they go and ferment things like beans. I mean, who thinks of fermenting beans? Like almost nobody ferments beans. You just cook them, and you got fermented beans with natto. And then they would have, you'd have something like what they do, like wasabi, which they use for sushi, for example,
Kimchi, all the
or
fermented stuff.
kimchi too. Yeah,
Mhm.
fermented stuff too. So all these different aspects, and one of the big ones is hot springs. A lot of people don't know that the Japanese they're obsessed with hot springs, and I'm definitely getting to that point. But I'm thinking, why do they value hot springs so much? You dig back, and all these things came from monks. They all came from monks, and Kukai implanted these ideas within their culture about being kind to someone, or patient with someone, or tolerant, or whatever you want to call it, affects all of society. And you can be in a country like Japan and literally, I don't know, if this was a wallet, you drop your wallet, most likely that wallet is going to still be there when you come back, just in the middle of the street, because there's a rule in Japan where people usually don't touch it, or somebody will pick it up and they say you drop it, and they'll try to bring it to you. You do that in a country like Mexico, your wallet's gone. You're never going to see your wallet again. It's such a different mentality. And that's not to put Mexico down. I mean, I grew up in South America. I know how they do things. I spent time in Japan. I know how they do things. And it's what a difference, so different. But all these ideas were implanted by these monks, who all they were trying to do was self-improvement. And that's the thing that I'm really big on. I'm big on self-improvement and trying to improve yourself, because it's going to help improve the world. And I think everybody should do that. I mean, I think I've mentioned this probably many times, of one of my favorite quotes by a guy named Rumi, which came up in a meditation of mine before I ever knew of this quote, which is, when I was young and dumb, I wanted to change the world. Like a lot of young people who want to point the finger at other people and say, you should do this, you should do this, you should change that. And then, of course, he said, when I became older and wiser, I realized that it's myself that I must change, so you should be working on you, not trying to tell everybody else, what to do. And so I think that these strong foundational ideas are ultimately the answer to your question, which is, why haven't the Japanese, I mean, have they been infiltrated to some extent? Yes, but they still have these cultural ideas are like roots of a tree. You ain't getting rid of them. They're just, they're there, they're within the people, and that's just the way it's going to be. And I think that that's made it hard, because even the Japanese sometimes are very upset with their government, even though they're very tolerant people. They don't like a lot of things that their government does, and they continue to be, the people that they are. Like, one thing about Japanese people is they hate war. Now, a lot of people in a lot of countries, hate war, but I'll tell you, I mean, the Japanese they really, really dislike war. It's not something that they particularly want to do. So
I think they're also quite lucky with their geographic location, because it's not so easy to access. I mean, think about Siberia, and that we've spoken previously about the book The Ringing Cedars of Russia, and Russia was actually one of the last countries standing there. I don't know how many of you guys know that there's a large portion of Russian history missing, like officially missing. There's like almost 1,000 years of a blank period in Russia. And so they used to live with very similar values and ethics as you're describing about the Japanese.
Yes.
It's just that they did it in a different way. And essentially, I think the whole world was under attack by infiltrators. They're not only the Jesuits, but all these missionaries trying to change the original religion of all people. I mean, think about all the murdered Native Americans. And they managed. 86 million Native Americans were killed throughout the whole conquering of both the South and the Northern continent. So they tried to eradicate this underlying existing natural religion that all people had. And maybe a few places like Siberia, where Anastasia from the Ringing Cedars of Russia lives, and she's managed to kind of preserve this and stay protected because it's such a desolated place. Nobody goes there. Same with Japan. I mean, I'm not saying it's inaccessible, but at the time, maybe it was less accessible than other places.
You know, I totally agree with you. I have a lot of friends who are I have a lot of Russian and Ukrainian friends. And I've seen a lot of things about the way that they do a lot of things are also very good. I mean, I like a lot of their cultural things, even things they do for their health. Like they're like, oh, you know, this thing is good for your health, and this is good for your health, and all these things that come from their culture. And you know, I've heard a lot of people say things about different people in different cultures, like, oh, the Russian people are this way, or the Japanese are this way, or Mexican people are this way, or Canadians are this way, or Americans are this way, all these different cultures. But deep within these ancient cultures in our past, where we did value health, we did value our food. And right now, I don't think we value it the way that we should. You know, I don't think we try to put technology into how to grow better food. I mean, we have technology as far as having tractors, you know, plant the food and pick the food, and machines, right? And the chemicals so that the bugs won't grow on them, and these type of things, kind of like the medical field. You just give a pill to try to subdue a lot of the symptoms or whatever, but we're not fixing the underlying issue. And that's obviously been one of my techniques with health, is mostly trying to figure out the underlying issue, you know, get some clean water in you, change your diet a little bit, you know, try to eliminate pesticides, like just basic stuff that has actually worked quite well. Better than I even expected. I realized that even I was brainwashed, you know, that think only the medical field, only doctors have answers. And it's not even close to being true, in my opinion. There's a lot that they don't know. And, but I can see that ancient cultures valued their health, and there was wisdom there. And it was deep rooted within culture. And a lot of it has been lost, though, also throughout time. And I hope that someday these things can come back, you know, wherever this wisdom was coming from. I believe that societies are supposed to have almost like these monks, like these people who dedicate their life to the introspective and going within. So if they find answers, they find them not just for themselves, but for the people. And then they share them with the people. How can I improve your life? How can I be of service to you? Hey, look, did you know that if you prepared food this way, like, for example, like sushi, did you know that they use vinegar in sushi rice?
No, I was not aware.
Yeah, so it's not just steamed rice. They have a little bit of vinegar in there. Well, it turns out that vinegar helps regulate blood glucose. So you're consuming a carbohydrate like rice, and now this is going to help you regulate, you know, the blood glucose, which is healthy for you. It's good for you to do that. Plus, it provides a nice flavor, you know, to it. But all these little tiny things that we can do in life that can enhance our health, enhance our
but
food,
you know, it's. I think America is one step ahead in the removal of natural foods and of traditional cuisine, because in Europe, vinegar is still pretty much used in every country on salads.
Yeah, America is the one that is unfortunately, I think they're very much like from the ego, in my opinion. You know, they don't seem to. There's positive things that I think America does, and then there's things that are very negative, and they lost their way. You know, but I hope that in the future, you know, that will change. But I think we're going to go through hard times, and it's just something that's unfortunately needs to happen. And so I try not to get upset about it. Some people get so upset about it, and of course sometimes I don't like it either. But I'm like, you know what? Just stay calm, and you do your part, and see where this road is going to lead, because it's clearly leading somewhere. And I do believe it's going to end up being something positive in the end.
Okay, so I suggest we end up also with on a positive note with a story that I am reminded now to tell you as well, talking about your individual contribution and individual contribution of not necessarily what you're doing, but what vibration and what level are you in this spiritual hierarchy that Greg was talking about, and what you can share with other people to improve the whole situation. So there was a study done on criminality in areas that had a lot of broken windows. And it's called, I think, the case, and it's actually a case that I've studied in business school. So it's a known, proven fact. It's not a made-up story. There were studies that whenever that criminality starts from the first broken window, if in any area of town, any neighborhood, there was one window broken that was not fixed within a month, this would lead into an explosion of criminality. Then the next window would be broken and the next and the next. But if the window were fixed, everything would stay under control. So you see, it's one small thing that affects whole areas and environments.
I completely agree with you. It's like one bad apple that ruins the apples, you know. And and I don't know why it reminds me of this one little writing that I remember reading one time that I relate to, that said, I wake up and the world wakes up with me. This is something that I believe was in Buddhism. And so I think that it's so important. I just know that there's probably no proof, but the more you work on you to do better, be better, it's going to have an impact. And eventually it's going to have an impact on others, and so on and so forth, like a chain reaction. So do your best to be your best. And that's the way that I live my life. That's part of my motto.
There is plenty of proof already. It's just that it's not widely available, or people don't read it. I mean, read this book that I quoted a few times during this conversation about the morphogenic fields. You affect the field with everything that you intend.
Totally agree. I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. So hopefully for the people who are listening out there, hopefully they can take that to heart and just be a better version of you.
Thank you so much, Greg. It's been a true pleasure speaking to you. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you have a wonderful time in Japan, and I hope we get to connect before or after.
In Japan, I'll definitely have more time to talk. Actually, here I'm usually more busy doing stuff, but when I get over there, I plan on being very slow, a lot of meditative time, and a lot of time to spend on me. And I'm going to just take things to another level for me. But yeah, I'll still have time to do little chats and stuff like that. So you should be able to contact me pretty easily.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Might even be in a closer time zone. I'm not even sure about that, but I think so.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Okay, thanks. It was nice to talk to you.